It's not every day that I get to interview somebody who I can say has spent 30 years behind prison bars. Yet that's my guest today. You've heard her before, and she's back again as we finish our interview, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr. Today's guest.
My guest today is Dr. Karen Gedney. We had such an engrossing interview when we had our recorded session that it was longer than just one episode of my show, so we broke it into two segments. So here we are with the second segment, and I'll continue asking Karen questions, and she'll continue explaining to us how she has leveraged 30 years behind bars into an amazing legacy.
Today's topic.
Legacy.
Karen, as you've continued working with this population and within the very locked down, rigid system that correctional medicine is, or the correctional institution, not necessarily medicine in a correctional institution, but at least the correctional institution is it's a very closed environment. A lot of limitations on you as an individual working there. Like, for example, when we first met, you couldn't have any kind of social media accounts. You had restricted use of your cell phone, all of those kinds of things. What would you say to someone who found themselves drawn to going into this environment as a profession, who as a physician or a health provider that's not a physician, a nurse practitioner or a psychologist or somebody, if they found themselves either by necessity or by desire going into this, what would you say is a top thing they would want to know from somebody who spent 30 years there?
I think the top thing to know that did not exist when I really started is that there are now organizations regarding the correctional world and the medical world. For example, there is the American College of Correctional Physicians. That really didn't exist when I was there. There's the National Correctional Center Health. It's NCCHC. I forget all what it was, because I never was really part of those organizations because they never really were around when I truly started. And I didn't know anything about anything. Someone who wants to go into correctional medicine should, one, be involved in those organizations, because then you have the ability to interact with medical peers. If you are thrown in as a doctor and the only people you're really interacting with are custody officers, people that run the prisons, nurses many times who have gravitated and bought into the prison mindset, and you are the doctor who gets thrown in, and you are, let's say, more idealistic in that you believe that people, regardless of their crimes, should still get appropriate health care, you need to be with your peers. I didn't have any. I was a loner. And it wasn't only till years later that I actually had a few peers, because I was really alone for many years. That's the greatest lesson, I would say. I'll also share that I read somewhere that the medical school graduating classes, there's a percentage of people who are already identifying that they want to go into correctional medicine, which I find wild because in my days in the 80s, no one would have ever thought to go to prison because, one, they weren't geared for medicine. Two, the pay was absolutely minuscule. And three, it was flat out dangerous. But now there are many physicians who want a different lifestyle. They want a salary. They want set hours. They want the ability to see people for long periods of time and know them. Well, that's the correctional world now. And if you work for a state retirement, state benefits. So there are things that it sort of amuses me now that there are young physicians that are thinking, I think this would be great. I'll go in there. I won't have to go home and even watch TV, which is true. You just go to prison and you can have all the drama and trauma excitement you want right there.
Let's talk a little bit about licensing. Now, you were at a state prison. Is that accurate?
State prison, right.
So then did your Nevada license cover practicing in the state prison, or is it a federal license that covers the state prison systems too?
So what happens is you're an employee, a state employee. Now, I have all my licensures just like other doctors, right? So then the Attorney General's office is the one that protects you against any litigation.
Okay.
There's a pro and a con there. Inmates like to create paper and sue, but the Attorney General's office takes care of that. And they're usually suing on civil rights issues, like I have chronic pain. You should have given me 100 OxyContin every 4 hours. Those type of civil rights issues.
When you were working in the prison environment, did you ever think, man, when I'm done being in prison, the first thing I'm going to do is this? Did you ever have thoughts like that?
Not really, because I always looked forward to vacations. I wasn't one of those people who never went on a vacation. In fact, my nurses were jealous of me because I would say, okay, the next week I'm going here, or the next 2 weeks I'm going to Tahiti and Fiji. And they'd be like, oh, Dr. Gedney, you can go, we can't. And I said, well, if you weren't a 2-pack a day smoker and drinking a 6-pack every night and saved up your money for a year, you could go on a vacation like that. But they didn't like me saying those sorts of things. But I did not envision what I would do after retirement. In fact, when I left, the prison administration had changed in such a way which was more pathologic for me than usual. And I left with 28.71 years. I could have eked out another 1.29 years, but it was making me miserable. And it was not a good time in the prison because of the particular person who was in power. I had always told myself that if the system truly, truly changes me, then I would have to go. And then I knew this was coming, and I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do? And I think you knew that I ran into you, and then you mentored me a little bit for a while, and that certainly helped. And I ended up deciding, okay, I'm going to try this, which was getting board certified in a whole new field of medicine, which was anti-aging and regenerative medicine, mainly because I was in my 60s, and also that field interested me. And I started writing my book, and I was a bit torn. What do I really want to do? Do I want to pursue the correctional world and making an impact, or do I just branch off into something new? And that made me a bit crazy for a while. And I came to the realization that I was probably in the prison for a reason. And I would run into inmates on the outside world where they had told me that my interaction with them, changed the whole way they lived their lives, and they were successful and had families. And I saw such a need in the anti-aging world. There's a tremendous amount of people that want to send every lotion and potion and pill and injection. But to make a difference in the correctional system, that's another one for someone like me who has always been first or been a loner, someone to tackle things that other people don't consider worthwhile tackling because there isn't the money or the prestige or things like that. For me, it's turning around those people's lives and the ones that are the hardest to turn around and have potentially the most unbelievable. I have incredible success stories, guys who came in when they were 17 and gangbangers and left at 31. And then because of the courses and my impact are now basically chief financial officers of major companies and kids and healthy and happy wife. And those type of success stories are great.
And one of those goes a long way, doesn't it? Just one success goes a long way.
Right. And I have quite a few. And for probably, 4 or 5 months now, I have been posting on a Facebook site, which is really related to things related to the prison. And I'll have one inmate who runs across it, who lives in the outside world, and he tells another one. And then I have certain ones telling me that I changed their lives. In fact, one of them contacted me 2 days ago, and he had been in and out of the system. And I said, God, it's incredible you're contacting me because you are in one of my chapters. You're Mighty Mouse. Right. I have a chapter called Mighty Mouse from this inmate from, like 20 odd years ago. And then he comes up out of the blue. Yeah.
That's amazing. Isn't that fun?
It's sort of fun. Right. And I'm sure you have experiences where people run into you, and tell you how important you were at that period of time.
Well, I think that's the beauty of mentoring in general or teaching, is that if you do touch a life, then people are grateful. And sometimes they don't really realize how grateful they are initially. It's only later when they gain perspective from more life experience that they really can appreciate what you've offered. And speaking of that, you hit on something that one of my mentors, when I first was going into practice, Dr. Lynn Swischuk, he told me when I was finishing up my fellowship in pediatric radiology, he said, Lori, if you're willing to do procedures that other doctors aren't willing to do, you will always have a job. And the example he used was the modified barium swallow, which if anybody out there is a radiologist, it's
right.
A lot of radiologists feel about that like they would about reading a whole board full of foot films or scoliosis films. It's not something you look forward to. On the other hand, you said the same thing. You said that you were willing to tackle things that other people weren't. And people who have that attitude and who look for those opportunities can always make a way for themselves, a financial way and a way that is fulfilling. So on the modified barium swallow story, I moved to a community where some x-ray techs had, they realized that the local radiologists had no interest in doing these studies. And so they set up a mobile service where they would go from hospital to hospital and do these things, with a radiologist who was willing to do it. And here everybody, was taking advantage of a situation where nobody wanted to do that work. So that's one thing that I got from what you just said. Look for opportunities, no matter where you're practicing, where there are things that other people are not willing to tackle. Take that on and call it your own. Own it and run with it and see where it takes you long term. Tell everybody what you discovered when you were investigating your retirement and you were trying to figure out how much money you would have to live on. What did you discover relative to your prison salary?
What I discovered was that as a state retirement, when I decided to look at the numbers, and I would not defer defer the amount you could as a state employee into the IRAs and things like that, I now actually bring home more money than I did when I was working.
Okay, so for all of you who want to be salaried physicians,
right,
that's an important lesson. You could have a steady income, you could take as much vacation as you want, and you could have more in retirement than you make while you're working, as long as you're working in a robust system that's not going to go bankrupt.
That's the thing. And every state is different. I am fortunate that Nevada didn't play with their state retirement fund. Now, of course, I also feel that in a state job like I had, you had the ability to defer a significant chunk of your money into an investment, which I did right from the beginning. So that investment, I don't have to touch, but it's another safety pillow.
Awesome. That's awesome.
In case I fall at some point.
So on a more personal level, I notice when I listen to you that there are terms you use that are insider prison terms. And I'm sure after working there a while, you probably developed kind of a callous shell around you that may or may not have influenced your femininity. And I mean, you exude femininity when given the opportunity, and you also can suck it all back in and be very neutral. I've seen that in you in different venues. Did you have to actively remind yourself how to be feminine since you had to repress all that in the prison environment once you retired, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. One of the things that happened is that I decided to join some women's groups because I realized really I had not interacted with women for 3 decades. I mean, really. I mean, all my patients were male. All the custody officers and administrators, for the most part, were men. My nursing staff was really a professional, and was also, I didn't really have major friends, if you know, in that arena.
Well, and even if you had, they would have been suffering from the same callous shell to protect yourselves. And, so it wouldn't have.
Yeah. And so when I left, I did throw away all my prison clothes. which really needed to be thrown away. I had this habit of always wearing black pants and a jacket. I didn't wear the white coat thing for a lot of reasons. One, it would get messy. And 2, inmates don't like authority figures. And if you wear a white coat, that's basically saying I'm the authority. And so if they mistook me for a nurse or somebody, I couldn't care less. But I had sort of a similar outfit going. There were jackets that I had that were 30 years old, which is embarrassing. But
No. Wait. Let's take a moment to commend you on staying the same size for 30 years. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's the other thing. I've always. That's fortunate for me that I like to exercise more than food. I didn't throw them out because I thought, well, just, a couple more years. And then when I was finished, one of the things I did was I threw all these jackets. They were too bad even for Goodwill. I just threw them out. And then I had to get some different clothes, and wearing a little bit of makeup, because I didn't wear makeup, things like that in the prison. And I know I have to even push myself further, but it's coming. That's a slower process.
Well, I mean, it took 30 years to neutralize all that. So, of course, it's going to be a process that takes time to regain that. Yet, I know you can turn it on. You're a ballroom dancer. I'm sure you're not.
Well, yes. Yeah, no. And the thing is, when if it's a formal event, I have beautiful long gowns, and because I'm tall enough, it really works for me, and I love that. But to me, that's like make-believe dress up, which is like fun. But just to roam around every day and look like a French poodle doesn't work for me.
But so when you joined the women's group, did you find yourself, did it help you become more aware of moments when you might be, I don't know how to express it. All of us have blind spots where we may come across in a way we don't intend. And what I'm thinking of is like the prison lingo and stuff like that, or just
Right.
some speech habits you might have gotten into in there. Was it easier to become aware of how to alter that when you surrounded yourself with other women, or did it really not make a difference?
Well, I think that I have to be a little bit careful with my terminology because you get desensitized in a prison. A lot of my inmates, of course, had limited vocabulary. And sometimes I'll find myself saying something that's grammatically incorrect, or my writing skills, where when you read inmate writings constantly and they cannot spell, it's not like they have spell check over there. You start forgetting even how to spell hemorrhoids correctly because it's a hemrod or a herod. I mean, yeah, you really start having to think, wait a second, how do I exactly spell that word? There's those sort of funny glitches. I think the best thing for me is listening to the other women. And I must say, I noticed that a lot of the women that I interact with, they like to tell stories of their sort of pain and suffering. I'm just saying, where I like to tell stories more of successes.
Yes, I would say that you are a person who cherishes transformation. You're like the Cinderella storyteller,
Yeah, and that's I mean, to me, yes, I could tell stories about inmates who did horrible things, but who wants to hear that? This is a big difference with me compared to custody and some of the people in the prison. There are many people in the prison who cannot wait to tell you about some inmate who screwed up. There's a prison term, right? Screwed up. I can't wait to tell someone the story about an underdog who hit a home run.
Awesome.
And there's the difference between the two of us on that fence line, right? I mean, I love the underdog stories, and some people love to revel in someone failing. And I always feel that part of that is related to their own security level.
Yeah, their own personal self-confidence.
Their personal self-confidence
mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And not all officers, but custody officers, there's a spectrum. And unfortunately, the ones who are negative, it's like they always say, you have a barrel of apples and you got 5% that are rotten. This is not good. It affects the rest of the barrel.
So I know that you're aware that a lot of doctors, there's an epidemic of doctors committing suicide now because they're stressed. They think they're overworked. They think they're not loved, not supported, not valued. And, you've been in an environment where all those things were amplified a million times, and yet you didn't consider suicide. You didn't become depressed. In fact, you're one of the most playful women physicians I know. And I wonder if you could just share, how do you stay playful even if you're in a dark place?
A couple of things. Number one, I have a wonderful relationship with my husband. And I think if you have that type of foundation, that's one less stress in your life. And as you know, I don't have children. There's another less stress in my life, though my husband and I mentored, and we do mentor children, but that's different. You're trying to make an impact, but you don't have the day in night wear and tear on you. Those two things really helped me out. But in the prison itself, I always had a bit of an odd sense of humor, which just kept things funny. My one of the doctors I worked with, and she and I worked together my last 15 years, and thank God she finally showed up and we had a good time. At lunch, we would eat by ourselves, and we would just laugh ourselves silly over the things that the inmates would say or what happened with us or the miscommunication. And that was wonderful. But I think I'm probably the only prison doctor who brought stuffed animals into the prison. And my sister had given me this green alligator because she's from University of Florida, the Gator Nation. And it had a little sweatshirt saying gator, but it was a reptile. So, there's something about having a reptile sitting on the counter as the inmates come in. And for some reason, the custody didn't mess with my stuffed animals. But every once in a while, my nurses had these little rubber duckies. And sometimes you'd find a little rubber ducky, in the alligator's mouth. But I don't know. At Christmas time, I gave him a little Christmas outfit. And then I had nurses that got into giving him different outfit changes. So that alligator had a Valentine outfit, a Halloween outfit. So he changed outfits for the seasons. But humor was a big one. Some people, when they get depressed, they turn to eating or habits that are sort of self-destructive. I fortunately had a habit of, if I was getting down on myself, I ended up working out more, which is why I kept my shape in prison, Lori.
Okay. And just share with people how many sit-ups you do?
Hundreds a day, probably. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a lady who just told you she's over 60.
Yeah.
And since she was how old have you been doing those sit-ups?
Since I was 6 years old, because they thought I had scoliosis and everything. So my German mother made me do sit-ups and leg lifts. And so I always work out.
So unlike many women her age, she has amazing core strength, which of course makes her a fun partner for her husband.
Yes.
And has kept her safe in an environment where there were extra risks, and has kept her emotionally healthy because she's taken care of her physical body so well. So the three things I heard you say are minimize stress through strong, healthy relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
If you have to develop a habit, develop a healthy habit instead of a destructive habit.
Right.
And schedule laughter. Yeah. And you scheduled laughter every day once you had the opportunity with that physician.
Right.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that's what I loved. And I feel for the doctors in the outside communities, and a lot of them are oriented to making, to financially make it. I had very low financial expectations. and when I started as a doctor, I was making, let's just say 25% of what another doctor like me would make in the community. But that was okay with me because that was not what really drew me to medicine. And I think there are a lot of doctors who really put in all that time and everything because they truly felt they would be financially compensated. And all the rules are changing in that. And very bizarrely, over the years, their income started to go down and mine started to go up because of the legal things with the legals. And now if you look at the average salary of a correctional physician, there are a lot of docs in the community who think, man, but it didn't start out like that. As an example, I think in Nevada, for example, the salary was, when I left, about $140,000 a year with the benefits, the retirement, the medical insurance. You're not paying, and of course you paid no overhead, no malpractice, none of that. and you build up vacation time. So build it up so you can go on 4 weeks, 5 weeks of vacation a year. I worked 4 10-hour shifts. So I had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off.
That's pretty good.
I mean, that's pretty good. And of course, you can see that is very different in terms of a stress. I had different stresses, but that whole money business and churning patients was not it. I could see a patient for an hour if I felt like it, or a minute. It depended. And to me, it would always depended on what did they need. And that was, to have that type of power is something that other doctors wish they had.
So that's kind of like a prison paradox. So if you want to practice medicine, if you agree to prison, you get all these freedoms that doctors who are practicing outside don't have those freedoms in some cases. That's right. So that's awesome. We'll call that the prison paradox.
And also think of this, the inmate population is the only population in the United States that has a constitutional right to health care. There is no other population. That's under Estelle versus Gamble. And there were custody officers who were upset that I would treat someone for something and their wife or sister had a similar problem and they couldn't, get the treatment, right? That sort of thing.
Oh, I bet.
Right. And that's not to say that inmates get everything, but they still have a right to care where a lot of people do not.
Your next step.
If people would like to find out more information about you and your book, 30 Years Behind Bars, well, first off, where can they find the book?
Well, if they want to find the book, they should go to Amazon. All right. And if they're looking for my website out of curiosity, then it would be discoverdrg.com, which is Discover Dr. G.
Yeah, it's not DRGs. It's Discover Dr. G, Dr. Gedney.
Right. Yeah. So, but it's DRG, all lowercase.com.
All right. Awesome. Well, Karen, thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing these little insights of the freedom and the transformation that you and your patients experienced because of the time you committed to an environment that most people who have gone through medical school don't even blink an eye at. It's a very important insight that you've given us and something that I know physicians out there who are going into practice will consider more favorably because of the information you've shared. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having me, Lori. And if anyone's interested in corrections, I would always recommend they go there and check it out and talk to those people before they start. But every system's different, and it was a wild ride for me.
Awesome.
And I wouldn't change it.
Wild ride, and you wouldn't change it. I love it.
There's more to explore at thedoctorsmentor.com.
Thank you again, Karen.
And thank you, Lori.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.